King's Quest 7. Wow, this is one of the more interesting titles, and it really does tie up a nice little loose end that number 4 left. I mean, this was released in 1994. One of the few Sierra games I think I got shortly after its release. And it definitely was different from the prior releases. I mean, after they went all out to get some live action for King's Quest 6 and their time of the full motion video, they decided with this one to go back. They decided with this one to go to a cartoonish style. Which I suppose, given the skills at the time, it was probably the best way to get some of the things easily in there. It's also the first of the games, no, it's part of the genre of games that relied on a bookmark system, where your progress was in part measured by what you got done and how close you were to reaching the end of the chapter. However, I will state that they did have some stuff that could be done in one chapter or another. But it wasn't a major lot of stuff because some of it couldn't be done until you actually got into the next, into the appropriate chapter. And this was one of those games where dying was, in turns, your friend. Because you didn't have to go through the hassle of a restore to undo your mistake. They just retry that. And sometimes there was some comical comments from the characters. Now, this game was actually first for the franchise because it was the first one to have two playable protagonists. And in reference to its title, The Princeless Bride, it focused on the ladies in the family. This is actually the first time you could play as Valenice, and your second time playing as Rosella. And the chapters were pretty much divided up equally between the two. Chapters 1, 3, and 5 you played as Valenice, and chapters 2, 4, and 6 you played as Rosella. And the chapters somewhat align and don't align. And that's mainly because of how they are. And it's ironic of how it is. But you have an opening movie like you had in the previous games, which sort of sets the story. And they decided to have a little bit of musical piece in this one, too. Rosella, well, she's old enough to get married now. And of course, you're going to find a prince for a princess. Because that's how the thing's supposed to work. I can roll my eyes at that if I wish. Well, of course, Rosella is getting a bit chastised by her mother about how she should soon pick a husband. But during this little talk, as they're taking a walk, Rosella spots a very unusual creature, and sees a very mysterious place in the images of the pond, in which it is now that she quote jumps into the pond, getting transported to a magical land. Of course, Valenice sees this, goes into a panic, dives in after her, and almost as they're about to, reach out in this mystical swirling vortex, we see a hand reach out of the side of the vortex and pull Rosella in. And Valenice comes out in a desert. A desert with some crazy creatures running around. I mean, we got a kangaroo rat jumping about and a jackalope. Yeah, there's an actual live jackalope in this land. So, Valenice must figure her way out of this desert. And while there are opportunities for Valenice to snuff it, they're sort of few and far between. But this is also a game that allows you some alternate ways of solving puzzles. And in the end, areas do get connected, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I mean, Valenice must get out of the desert. Now, there is a rock face in the cliff wall that will open and allow you out. But you have to find the pieces to do that. You must find other things to do that. I mean, you got to find various items that you'll need. But to make things difficult, you have to solve puzzles to do that. Now, of course, these aren't overly hard. You can figure them out with some trial and error. See, I remember the first time I played this, and I didn't really have any walkthroughs. I didn't have access to them because, the internet was still in its infancy then. But I did trial and error to work my way through it. And eventually I did solve the puzzle and get through. I mean, to get some items, you have to get down to the bottom of a pool or a well. You're going to have to find, quote, salt water in the middle of a desert, or fresh water in the middle of a desert, too. Actually, fresh water you have to find, but you find salt water. You are going to have to help the kangaroo rat get his glasses back from the jackalope. And you're going to have to you're going to have to help a spirit that is dying of thirst. You're going to have to get past a giant scorpion. And like I said, to solve some of these puzzles, you have alternate methods. You could do one thing or do another thing. Of course, as you're working your way through all this, you are also getting somewhat of an idea that something is not right in this land. However, once you get through the desert and open up the mouth to lead you to the next area, well, like any good story, or like any good storyteller might do, the chapter ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, with Valenice being menaced by a giant lizard in that tunnel. And then we go to chapter 2. And chapter 2 actually technically starts before Valenice would technically enter the desert. But it starts basically when Rosella is pulled out of that vortex. She is pulled in by what appears to be the king of the trolls, King Otar. I forget his number. But King Otar appears surprised that Rosella has become a troll. He's not sure how this happened. And to be honest, neither is Rosella sure how it happened. Now, of course, they give Rosella a room. The nursemaid of King Otar is not too thrilled with this. So, when Rosella gets out of the room and confronted by the nursemaid, who's calling her a usurper, but Rosella is really not that, and not she. The nursemaid now understands that Rosella is just got pulled into this. So the nursemaid agrees to help Rosella, but Rosella has to fetch the items that is needed. We also start to find out how King Otar has changed since Militia has been around. We learn that Lilish is a very vile woman, and she's up to no good. Well, Rosella goes to get the stuff that she needs to turn back to normal. Now, this includes getting the scales from a crystal dragon, who is a little bit down because they've lost their flame. She must get various items from other people. This includes meeting some decent as well as ill-mannered trolls. I mean, one troll is trying to hit on her. He's taken lessons from Larry Laffer. We also learn about how things are happening, how Militia is controlling things. See, she wants control of the volcanics underground. She wants to, quote, trigger the volcano. In fact, if Rosella when Rosella escapes the room after she's turned back to normal, much to the delight of our what appears to be Otar, He is delighted. Militia is none too thrilled and has her placed in a back in the bedroom with the doors locked, and she's going to take care of her. Well, afterwards, we have Rosella get out of there, find Otar's dragon toad, which basically clues in Matilda that there's something amiss. And so Rosella volunteers to go up to Ooga Booga Land, where the king is being held, and rescue him. In fact, the chapter ends once Rosella is able to get to the elevator to get up there. And then, unfortunately, the elevator the thing breaks and she's hanging on for dear life up there. And that's our cliffhanger for that chapter. So then we move on to Valanice's chapter again. And now Valanice must, of course, survive the lizard in the tunnel, which is easy to do. You just feed the damn thing. And then move on to a very beautiful, apparently fruitful land. But things are not necessarily going right. And I say this because one such figure, Lord Addis, has been turned into a stag. Another figure, Ceres, has been turned into a tree and wounded. This has caused the river to dry up. The land has started to die. More of Militia's work, as we find out. And Valanice eventually makes her to the land of Falderall. Or the city of Falderall, I should say. Which is a land of anthropomorphic animals, ruled over by Yip Yap. But of course, she needs the help of someone in town, basically a snake oil salesman, who's actually a snake. He needs something that's in the palace or town hall of Archduke Fifi the Yip Yap. So you have to sneak in and take it. In fact, it's at this time that we learn that that Valanice can find out that Rosella is in peril in Ooga Booga Land. But we aren't told exactly what the peril is. However, Valanice must figure it out. She must, get all this, get the statue, and get out. But then there's something thrown into the mix. Apparently, the moon has fallen. It's obviously the moon because it's a hunk of green cheese. So, at the end of Valanice's chapter, she manages to get the hunk of green cheese out of the fountain in the middle of town, and of course gets accused of stealing the moon. And that's where the chapter ends, with her being arrested. Now, we go back to Rosella, who is basically hanging on for dear life when she is helped by the gravedigger of Ooga Booga Land. It should be noted that almost pretty much everything in Ooga Booga Land is undead. And in the course of events, we found that because of Melicia's meandering abouts and her shenanigans, Ooga Booga Land is falling apart. We have some rotten, ghoulish kids to deal with, who obviously mean Rosella harm. We have the boogeyman, who's now pretty much got free reign because he can do anything he damn well pleases. Because the true rulers of Ooga Booga Land, Count, Lord and Lady Tepish, obvious nod to Vlad Tepes. No, Vlad the Impaler, have been killed. We also find out that, Ooga Booga, King Otar is basically trapped in the home of the boogeyman. So, Rosella has to save King Otar. We found out about his true wand that he has. Rosella must rescue him. Then they must somehow get out of Ooga Booga Land. And King Otar must remain in a hidden form. So Otar must stay transformed, and Rosella must get out of Ooga Booga Land. This means, of course, going through a swamp where there's a fearsome swamp monster. Luckily, we have something that can destroy it. And we have to get past the home of Militia. We may need something in there, too. In fact, we do need something that's in there. It's the only thing that would be able to stop her. So, as we work our way through all that, we must, of course, get past everything. And eventually, Rosella does get past it all, past the dangerous woods of the werebeasts, because she's dressed up like Lady Tepish, which confuses the hell out of the beasts, but they manage to snag the robe. She gets to Falderall, where we learn that Valanice has been there and left already. We get into the Duke's place and find where there is a way to get into the Volcanics underground from there. And we get there to the control room, and Rosella manages to they manage to get there and find the false King Otar, and the two get into a scuffle. The real king and the false king. And we end the chapter there. Now, chapter 5 opens with Valanice being sentenced to return the moon to the sky. And then she's allowed to leave. But she does. And gets something from the snake oil salesman that will allow her to get past the forest of the werebeasts. If we've helped Lord Addis at this time, he will, of course, uh, detain the plant monster. This is, of course, happens before Rosella kills it with the defoliant. And we really get the idea of what's going on. Now, of course, Valenice decides to go to the land of the fairies to help her find her daughter. In turn, helping them because of whatever Malicia is up to. Of course, we find out that Malicia has imprisoned Mab in some ice. We find out that that Valenice must also get there, and she finds this out by talking with the Fates when she's able to get up to the land of the fairies. To do that, she has to, quote, restore the true count. That involves, of course, getting past Lady Tepish, opening his tomb, getting his head, and, of course, restoring everything. He gives you the means to get up there. And once you go through multiple visits, quote, into Dreamland, talking to the Fates, and getting to the top of the mountain to talk to your son, who is also wise in the way of the dream worlds, you're able to then free Mab through a very long process, and she will agree to help you. You find out that Oberon and Titania has been looking for their lost son. And Rosella, but now must deal with this volcano about to erupt. Of course, with all this happening, we end the chapter like that. And now, you're back to Rosella in the final chapter. So, Rosella starts this chapter. This is a short chapter, but it's very somewhat fast paced. Valenice must, of course, Rosella must first transform the fake Troll King. And what we end up discovering is that the fake king is Edgar from King's Quest IV. Surprising Rosella. Of course, Valenice, Malicia shows up, dismisses Edgar, who at this time is now trying to make up for all his mistakes here, and then move on. He flies off to find Valenice and bring her down to the underground. Rosella has been transported inside the volcano, so she's got to dig her way out of there. She's got to get back into the room and then use that to... Now, she, of course, should have plugged in the device so it has time to charge up. She's got to wake up Otar. He can stop the volcano from blowing. Valenice arrives, thanks to Edgar, not even knowing it's Edgar. Then Malicia shows up, apparently, quote, kills Edgar. And then Rosella blasts Malicia with the device. This reverts Malicia back to a baby. Of course, we also learned that Felicia is the sister to Titania, making Edgar his her nephew. And then we find out the whole deal. Now, of course, Rosella has one last thing she has to do before the whole end plays out, and that is basically give Edgar the extra life that a cat gave her for helping it. And then we basically get into the whole story, where we have the ending. You could either have it, of course, with Edgar dead and Rosella in mourning, or he's alive and she and Edgar start courting. And everything ends up fine. I mean, it's kind of cute watching Otar just getting all giddy over this in the end. But this was the last game of the franchise to feature the royal family. And it's a fitting end if you look at it that way. I enjoyed this game. I enjoyed it when it first came out. I enjoy replaying it every once in a while. This is a game that is beautifully done. It had a high bar to live up to with 6. And I think the directions they went with it were a good thing. I do recommend playing this one. Especially if you want to, get the full experience of everybody playing the game. And that's all I'm going to say about this one. And I may have, let me do something after this one. I haven't decided yet. I've got a little time to figure that out. Because I had a little trouble getting 8 to run, so I had to go a different route. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to give myself a little extra time to figure this one out. Maybe I'll be back soon to talk about the franchise as a whole, and somehow include the 8th one in there. Until next time, please thank you for listening if you have, and I want you all to take care and have fun. Bye all.